Hi there, and a very warm welcome to this week's video. Maybe you can see I'm a little bit tired because I prepared the scene last night and it got a little bit late. So this week what we are going to do is put stickers on surfaces, and while we have done that before in our decals video, this time we are stepping it up a notch by weathering those decals and also making some adjustments to place them a little bit better. So without further ado, let's grab your coffee and let's jump in. Alrighty, let's see what we are going to do today. So in this scene that also will be available on Patreon, we have a traffic light button, a typical German design, and around that we have some decals such as the Cinema 4D here and the Otoy decal and so on. We have some nulls here, so if I search for example, Blender sticker 2 and move it, you can see I can move my sticker with it. Also, if I go into the nodes of the Otoy sticker, for example, we can weather it. This is just a mix slider, so you can see we can dissolve it more and more, and this is basically what we are going to do today. Alrighty, so let's get started. As always, let's go about this a little bit methodical and build it up layer by layer. To start with, we have a very simple base geometry where we are going to put on our stickers. Since we are working on Octane, let's start with a black and white Otoy logo. We of course need a material, so let's go to Materials, Create, and then create a glossy material. We are going to make use of layer stacking in Cinema 4D. If you are from Blender, you would need a blend or a composite material to do the same thing. Let's rename our material to sticker and then go into its nodes and bring in our texture here. So 2 side quests. One, if you want to stay tidy with your nodes, then I recommend turning on the snapping option. And second, since this is a black and white logo, we can go to float to save on some VRAM. Next, what we want to do is connect the texture not to the diffuse, but to the opacity, so we can see the logo, and then apply it as a stacked layer here. And you can see it's working. Next, let's take care of some material settings. For example, the color here. We don't need a second texture because we can do that in the diffuse as the logo is just one colored. I've already copied the iconic Octane red color, so if I paste that in, we can see that here. Now, maybe I should have done this before, but in the basic tab, what we want to do is go with the BRDF model of GGX energy preserving, and then go to the roughness and set it to 0.5. This really comes down to if you have a glossy sticker or a matte one. As a next step, I want to move the logo. This seems like I skipped some steps. This is important if we bring in more textures or noises for the weathering effect later, so I'd rather do it now. To do this, what I'm going to do is bring in a null object, also call it sticker. Then in the material or the texture, let's create a projection node and go with my favorite, the XYZ to UVW. And here what we're going to do is link in the null and set the coordinate space to world space. Otherwise, it won't work correctly if our plane is inside a hierarchy. Now, you can see this is looking a little bit odd here, and this is because of a couple of reasons. First, we are using Octane units, and they're translated 1 to 100. This means that a value of 1 here is 100 units in Cinema 4D, which means a meter, and our plane is only 40 centimeters across. The second reason this looks odd is that Octane is projecting into the Z-axis of our null object when it comes to XYZ to UVW projection. To help this, what we can do is rotate our axis towards the plane we are projecting on. Now, you don't see any difference in the rendering, and a reload might help. Yes, it does. To avoid not driving blindly here, we can add a Octane object tag. And in this tab here, force updates, set it to enabled. So now if we move the null here, you can see now we are getting real-time updates. To get a little bit more orientation in the viewport, let's create a gizmo by selecting the null object here and then go to splines, and while holding shift create a rectangle spline. go to the spline width and height and set it to 200. Despite what I've set with 100, this is the right measurement, and this is just how Cinema 4D's texture space is working. To get the logo down to scale, let's go with the null again and make sure you're in object mode here, and then go to scale and scale it down. And you can see now the spline is displaying the bounds of our decal. And those bounds just appear bigger because we have some headroom around the logo originally. Alright, I think we are finally ready to give the dissolve or weathering effect a shot. It's remarkably easy and only consists of a couple of nodes. Let's introduce those one by one. Let's introduce you to the first node, which is, drumroll, the Octane noise. Let's also plug it into the same projection because I needed to move with the same null. To see what we are doing, let's plug it into the diffuse for now. And we can see we have a standard noise. Feel free to experiment. I'm going to use the settings that I figured out in my preparation, such as setting the noise type to chips, because with its structure it lends itself to the crackles you get in weathered decals. Also, let's increase the structural detail by going octaves and set it to 8, and set the contrast to 2 to get a little bit of a darker look. Right now, the noise is occupying our diffuse, but where we actually want it is the opacity together with our alpha. So I guess you guessed it, we have to mix them. Let's bring in a mix node and go with the noise into the texture 1 and the alpha into texture 2, and then plug it into the opacity and get rid of the diffuse. Now, this is not looking like what we want, but we are getting close. To get there, we need to bring in one of my favorite nodes, which is the Octane gradient. To show you a little bit better what we are doing, let's go into solo mode here and move those knots. Here we go. Basically what we need to do, we need to increase the contrast around 50%. So I'm going with the black knot to 45 and with the white knot to 55. Here we go. You can already see where this is going, so let's go out of the solo mode here, and now you have your crackles, and you can change those by moving the amount slider in our mix. Let's go from a perfect texture to a dissolved one. Very nice. Of course, just adjusting the opacity isn't all there is. We can use the mix to also, for example, drive the bump to give it a more realistic feel. Now, as I've done this before, we are working on a very large scale. So what I want to do for the next step where we add some bump, go to the stickers and bump it up to 0.1. Let's just duplicate the gradient node here and stick it into the bump, of course. You should already see something. If not, let's actually go with the camera somewhere where we have a little bit of backlighting. So yeah, you can see the bump is happening. Right now, it's just following the ridge though. To have it a little bit more realistic, what we can do is move the destruction a little bit more inward. To do that, we add yet another knot, make it around 70, this is trial and error, and make it black. And you can already see what's happening. Right now, the effect is super strong, so let's go with the middle knot and turn it back to 10%. And now if we move more closely, you can see we have a sort of portion of the sticker that's already loose. And of course, the cool thing is that this is moving with the animation. Now, if the ridges here are too blurry and you want them to be more sharp, what you can do is move those both knots together. So, for example, 49 and 51. Here we go. Now, this is dissolved completely, but just a little bit of movement here reveals them again. So if we move out, you have a nice crackled logo. Of course, to improve customization, what you can do is get a transform on your noise here, so you can make it smaller or bigger depending on your needs. Now, if you stayed awake through all of this, first of all, congratulations and thank you. You might have noticed something, and this is that the outlines of the logo are still sharp, so they are not fitting the weathering look. Fortunately, there's a very easy solution for this. And this is drum roll again, blurring the alpha. This is all there is to it. Of course, this is not giving you a pristine logo, but if I exchange that here, you can see this is looking much more weathered. And now if we go and change the scale here, you can see that it begins with eating into the rims, and it eats for quite a while and then it begins to dissolve. And this is all the blur does, and I was really happy when I figured that out. What we talked about right now is a logo that just needs an alpha and gets its color from the diffuse of the material. But if it's a multicolored logo, we need to act differently. No worries at all, this is rather easy too, so let's bring in another logo, namely the Cinema 4D one, and plug it into the diffuse so we get the Cinema 4D logo's colors. It's as easy for the alpha, so let's delete our old alpha and then just duplicate our logo here. The only thing we need to do is set the type from normal to alpha. And if the linked image texture has an alpha, it will be displayed here. Now let's route it through our old pipeline here, and then you can see we successfully exchanged our logo. What you also can see is that we are back at our old problem with the alpha being not blurred. So let's follow me to Photoshop where we can see how this is done. Welcome to Photoshop and our Cinema 4D logo. So let's go to Channels and pick our alpha so we can see it. Blurring this isn't very difficult at all. With the alpha selected, just go to Filters, then Blur, and then, for example, Gaussian Blur. Here we go. If we now select everything again, we can see that we extended half of the alpha outside of the logo, which isn't what we want. So what we need to do is clip off the darker half of our alpha that extended outside, so we keep inside of the fringes of the logo. And we can do that by going to Image, Adjustments, and then Levels. The mid here is 128, so if we put it to 128, then we clipped the outside part. So now if we select both of those, or even select this, you can see the alpha is blurred until the rim, and this is what we want. So now we can save a blurred alpha version of this logo and jump back to Cinema 4D. And back in Cinema 4D, the only thing we have to do is exchange the alpha with the newly saved blurred one to get the same effect that we already know with the eating in of the rims and then the dissolve. Very realistic. This is basically the base of it, but as always I have some boni for you, or bonuses. Anyway, you know what I mean, some extras. And I think those are extra rich this time, so stay tuned for the flavors. Welcome to the bonus section. This is not a bonus yet, because I forgot some things. So first of all, I forgot plugging in the projection into our diffuse color. And second, if you scale down the null, you get repetition. To avoid that, we can go to our alpha and set the wraparound mode to black colors on the U and V coordinates. Now, finally, welcome to the bonus. Since this is about aging and dissolve, maybe the colors are a little bit too strong here. So my first tip would be to get a range node. Let's try to find this range. Here we go. And this is the second in the list. And then pipe it in here. So to make this a little bit flatter, what we can do is raise the output min and shrink down the output max, because nothing is white. And in our texture, there's a lot of white space. So let's go for 0.6, for example. And this makes the decal look older already. In addition to that, we can age the look even more by yellowing the edges. It's basically using the same gradient effect as for our opacity and bump. This needs a little bit of setup though, so let's make some room here. It's not difficult, we just need to shuffle some nodes around, so let's copy the mix texture as well as the gradient for our opacity, and then feed the old mix texture in the gradient and give it as an amount to the new one. So basically we are building a mask between the range mapped beauty and something else, and this is our RGB texture. So let's bring one in, and this is going to be the color for our edges. So let's make it slightly dark orange like this. You might be already able to see it. Let's zoom in a bit. To make this more pronounced, what we can do is alter our mask. For example, give the white color more room by going to 53, for example, and you can play around with this and give it more or less yellowing as you like. If we go through the decaying process, you can see we are going from a perfect logo to eaten away edges and then to weathered brown edges and decaying. Welcome to the second bonus. This one is a great one, if not the best. Well, let's stick with the best for now. For this, I moved scenes. A couple of words of caution here. So if we go to the sticker, you need to make sure the null is still linked or linked again. Also, I had to scale down our null quite a bit. The gizmo is still working, but this increased the bump. So what I want to do is go to the sticker and to the bump and set it to 0.01. Here we go. It's a little less bumpy now. Also note that I placed the Decal texture on all three spheres, as well as giving it a Octane object tag with the force update enabled. But let's finally get to the star of the show, which is under Tools and the Blaze tool. With the sticker selected, select the Blaze tool and set the up direction to -D. And what we can do now blew my mind when I first figured that out. We can blaze our decal by dragging along the viewport. Also, we can rotate it. Very nice. And finally, the third and last bonus. I was a little bit sneaky and hid something from you. Let's reveal that. If we go outside and go around here, you can see we have a duplicate of our logo always on the opposite side of objects. This obviously is not what we want, so I figured out a method to avoid that. Of course, this involves tinkering with the nodes again. So what I have in mind is using Octane's fields. I have made a video on this, the link is in the upper right corner. What I want to use is a spherical field that goes around the logo space, basically around the gizmo here, and everything outside of it is not allowed to exist, at least if it comes to our decal. So let's create a field here, and as I said, I need a spherical one. Right now this is at the center of the scene and falls off to black within 100 units. You can see that here with the fall off radius being 1 Octane unit, meaning 1 meter in Cinema 4D units. The really cool thing is that we didn't tinker around and only scaled our null object. So if we put that into the projection, then the field is at the position of the null and also spaced the same as our gizmo. To make use of that, we need to multiply that into the opacity stream. So let's do so by going with a multiply and add the opacity as well as the field. Now this falls off from the middle to the rim, as this is a fall off radius here, but there's an easy fix with the core radius. So if we set the core radius to 0.99, it is a much more harsh fall off at the rim. Now on to our moment of truth. Let's have a peek behind, and it seems like the logo is gone. Let's check. Yes, it worked. Our logo is now only showing up near where we have our null. And that's pretty much it. Small word of caution yet again. Despite what I'm doing here, having the object decal tag on every object, it's better for the performance to only have it where you actually need it. Other than that, I hope you learned something and could take away something from it. I thank you very much for watching. Let's thank also those people who are supporting me to make those videos, my Patreons. Especially my €50 tier subscribers, Shields Augustinen, Just a Freakin', and Leon Studio TV. Also, of course, a huge thank you for my €15 tier subscribers, Doyim. For the Thieves, Render King, Alessandro Bonchio, Alessio De Vecchi, BVR, Chris Fritchie, Christian Grajewski, Erbe Plus Akademie, Evanilson Tavares, Graham Bucknell, James Conkle, Joel Muckimer, John Edward, Chris Clemson, Matthew Hall, Nico Straub, Part 1 of 2, Ralf, Random Capybara, Raiko, Renato Marquez, Reshock, Reza Ansari, Shamus Johnson, Shiro 2049, Terry Wayne Ranson, and Yassin Rupp. Thank you all so very much for making it possible to produce those videos that you all enjoy. Hi there to all the after credit people and friends of the peak decalization. Thank you very much for gathering around here and listening to me one more minute. Right now I'm in the phase of asking myself if I'm even capable of doing short tutorials. I don't dare talking about quick tips. If you have any ideas for shorter topics, let me know. Of course, long topic suggestions are also welcome, so no matter what, please pass them on to me. Anyway, on with the usual. If you want to show your support, let's post a projector emoticon in the comments down below. Thank you very much for listening this long. As always, a fantastic start into the week. I really mean that. And if you're watching this later, then simply a good time to you. Now, following might be a little counterproductive, but I wish you a great time and happy aging. Bye.